Okay, so we're going to look at what makes a successful proposal. We know getting into AERA sometimes can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're doing it for the first time or a first time for the SIG. Sometimes you're not quite sure what makes a successful proposal. And so hopefully we'll take a little bit of the mystery out of it for you. Stephanie.
I did for a session I did at AERA on data analysis tools, and in which sort of talks about the 9 kinds of research. And Eliza will post, I think, on the web page, right?
Yes.
And at least I didn't call her sweetie. I think I call her anything else. Anyway. So it's the stories of experience, and it seeks to explore complex interactions that are woven together and separated into meaningful units such as stories or narratives. Biographical and autobiographical phenomenology, ethnography. There's also other work like appreciative inquiry and self-study that use narrative in the work. So, you know, the thing is that story is a fundamental part of this in some way. Would you want me to say more?
No, that's fine.
This is a really important resource if you want to know how to judge the quality of your self-study. This book by Audrey.
Or narrative.
Oh, narrative. I was going to go on and talk about the other kind. So it's edited by Audrey Trainer and Elizabeth Grau, and they're individual chapters of different kinds of qualitative research, and it tells you, okay, so this is how you judge the quality of this research. So if you're worried about either writing a proposal or judging the quality of work that you are asked to review, then this book is really amazing. There's a quantitative one too, that if you're doing.
Okay, so here are some really important dates for you to mark on your calendar now. I think I didn't replace the conference theme, so the conference theme may not be correct. But what's really important in big, bold, underline in your calendar, many alerts, is the submission due date is July 31st at midnight Pacific time. All right, please, by all means, submit way earlier than that, but that gives you about 2 weeks to pull things together into a submission. And now with this recording, which will be posted as well, you'll be able to see how these things are judged so that you can write a better focused proposal. Also important to know is that next year, AERA will once again be in 2 modalities, in person in Philadelphia, and then virtual just at the end of April. All right, Stephanie.
So I'm going to let you read this and I'm just talk about it. So a paper submission is an individual paper with at least one author, and it's going to be presented as a paper, poster, or roundtable. Now, one of the things that's really important to know is that you might submit a paper proposal, and the program chair might come back to you and say, would you be willing to do this as a roundtable? So just be aware of it. And often it also goes the other way. Sometimes cluster of papers where, where they go really well together. And even though the author has said, I want to do a roundtable, you might get a question, would you be willing to do this as a, usually in the narrative people don't do posters very much. So other than in the past, we've submitted a group poster session, which really ends up being small group discussion around a number of topics. But the narrative sig doesn't always do poster sessions. We do roundtables. Narrative paper in final form or in progress. It can't, so when you do your proposal, when you do your paper, it can't be in the form. Are we talking about the proposal or the paper?
We're talking about the overall paper.
Okay, so when you do your paper for presentation, it shouldn't be a series of slides. It should be like a text document, and it shouldn't have the elements. That's what I'm doing. I'll do a PowerPoint, and then I'll go back and write my paper up PowerPoint, because sometimes that's helpful. You don't have to use APA. You can use Chicago, hopefully not MLA, which is what my students always wanted to use, but you don't have to use APA. But the thing is, probably where you're going to submit it, that's what they use. And so it probably would be helpful if you did it in APA. Submitters can review and make changes during the submission period, and authors of accepted papers may upload a final paper by March 10th, 2023. Now, I know when I was a young scholar, I used to always worry about people stealing my work, and so I hated to post papers generally, but I really haven't heard a terrorist story of someone stealing a paper. I've heard terrorist stories about stealing ideas, but not about someone going in and taking a prospectus and then stealing that paper. An important thing is that your title can only be 15 words. The abstract is only 120 words, which is really hard. And the proposal is 2,000 words or less. The paper can be longer. But for your proposal, it's only 2,000 words.
And in reference to the next bullet point, author identifying information must be removed. Really be careful about that, because the system can kick out your submission. Like, just kick it out so that we can't see it if there's author identifying information in there. So really make sure that you go through and you know where all of that is. Even if you're doing something that's self-reflected, an auto narrative type of study, then make sure you balance that line so that it's just vague enough that it's not, nobody reading can be like, oh, that's clearly Megan Gowan's work because of all of these other details. Megan would never do that, but just make sure, because that does happen sometimes to some authors.
In your reference list, if you haven't done this stuff before, I don't need to be like repetitive, but you just list all of your publications at the very top in date order, and you just say author and the date in your reference. author and date for anything of yours. And if it's co-authored, you say authors and put the date.
Okay, so the paper will be reviewed on 7 elements. Okay, so these are the things we'll look at an actual review so that you'll be able to see what that looks like if you haven't done a review yet. But it's on objectives or purposes, perspectives or theoretical framework, methods, techniques, or modes of inquiry, data sources, evidence, objects, or materials, results and or substantiated conclusions or warrants for the point of view, and then scientific or scholarly significance of the study or work. And then we have added this. Proposals fall within the broad parameters umbrella of narrative research. And we've added that because sometimes, somebody will submit just a really amazing piece of work. They have worked really hard on it. They've submitted a wonderful proposal, but it doesn't actually fall under narrative research and would be better placed somewhere else. And so we sometimes are able to do that and move it to another SIG or division that more in lines with that submission. But it's really important, especially for all of the SIGs, that whatever that SIG is around, and for us, it's narrative research, all forms of narrative research, that the proposal falls within that designation of narrative research. And as Stephanie said, there are lots of different kinds of narrative. There's lots of ways of doing it. And we just want to make sure that really good narrative research is being done, and not just really wonderful music or really wonderful research where somebody decides to add a story, because that isn't always the same as narrative research.
So one of the things can I say one more thing, honey?
Yes.
Can you go back?
Oh, sorry. I don't know how to do that.
So
There we go.
One of the things I want you to notice, I'm going to say something that I'm not bragging, but there has not been 1 year since 1986 that I haven't gone to AERA with the proposal. So my major professor, who at that time was Kathy Carter, taught me how to write proposals, and I've always been quite successful. But this should tell a story, so you start with your objectives or purpose, and that objective or purpose is essentially your wonder, your research question, your topic. Then you move to the perspectives or the theoretical framework. When you're doing that theoretical framework, its whole purpose is to communicate the theoretical work and research in which this is grounded and which this builds on. But just as importantly, you want to use that perspective or theoretical framework to open space so that when people get to the end of it, they say, oh, someone ought to do research on. And that thing they ought to do research on is what you're proposing. Then methods, techniques, or modes of inquiry. This is mostly qualitative work. So your first sentence in that should identify, maybe you're doing narrative inquiry. It's more likely you're just doing narrative research, and it's more likely that you're using particular ways of analysis, like positioning theory, or I'm trying to think of some others, grounded theory, or whatever, to do your analysis. So in that first sentence, you ought to say, this study uses this methodology because, you should defend why it is that methodology. And then you're going to talk about the techniques, the strategies, the modes of inquiry. And and then you're going to move to data sources and data analysis. That's not there, but you're going to say, this is what my data is, and this is the process of analysis. Now, there's only 2,000 words here. So this is where you have to be magnificently succinct and yet able to communicate what you did. And then you have your results or substantiated conclusions. You're not going to have much space. So do the best you can. And then finally, but this all flows together. So when I get here and read this, these two things, it should answer this question. When I get to the data, that data, I should be able to look at it and say, oh yeah, that data will let me answer that question. I ought to be able to look at your data analysis and say, oh, if they do that kind of analysis, they'll be able to answer that question. So what you want everything to do is link. People don't say this, but in qualitative research, one of the things that communicates the trustworthiness is that kind of trajectory. You know, by the time I get through reading this, I'm going to know whether you're a person whose judgment and scholarship I can trust. And that's what you're trying to communicate in this short 2,000 word paper. Go ahead, Eliza.
And all of those things, number 1 to number 6, will lead the reviewer to judge appropriately if it falls under the narrative research umbrella, which explains a little bit more here. So moving on, I'm going to pass over to the program chairs, Leslie and Megan, to explain what happens next.
So unlike Stephanie, I did get rejected. And here I'm showing vulnerably one of my proposals, which I think it shows that we can learn from mistakes. And as you can tell, here are the 7 criteria. At the end, it's a little bit different because in here it says, so we have objective, perspective or theoretical framework, methods, of course, data sources, results, and then scientific or scholarly significance of the study, and then conceptual framework of narrative or inquiry into narrative, which actually it tries to really is encompassing the one that we added, right? And then aesthetic or innovative qualities, we are not judging that criteria per se, and contribution to narrative research, again, is the 7th criteria that we added. So that's just to show, and as you can tell, this was a proposal called In Between English and Spanish, an inquiry into Latino bilingual teachers' experience, which is my area of expertise. And you can tell that even though I got high scores here, the lowest ones, you could see that it was methods, right? So then I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. So my lowest scores, as I said, was both methods and narrative framework. And if you read some of the comments of the reviewers, it says things like, I think that the purpose, theoretical framework, and scholarly significance could be further developed, right? That's the key, further developed. And then they also say things like, there must be inquiry into the experiences of Latino Spanish-speaking students becoming teachers so that we can better understand the challenges that may cause leaks, meaning that you need to better tie what you're proposing with existing scholarship. And then another one, I feel that a clearer explanation is needed about the kinds of accounts by male bilingual. Again, it's asking me for that connection with previous research. And then what kinds of accounts exist in research about the male bilingual teachers. That's again, so you can see a consistency among reviewers about how they are asking me to further develop the theoretical framework and what is that the research says out there. Again, like Stephanie said, out of reading the proposal and especially the theoretical framework, then I love how you put it together of saying, well, yes, she's right. We need to find ourselves asking more about why male bilingual teachers don't get into the profession, for example, if that's the answer that I want to, the question that I want to pose. And then what is the gap in research being addressed by this study, right? So this is something. So you can move into the next one. Actually, I thought you were moving into the, but it's okay. So should I address these, Eliza, as well?
I think people can just look over it.
Okay.
One thing about if you're going to, especially if you feel like you're going to provide some harsh criticism of something as a reviewer, I just want to drive everyone's attention to the end, which says all the best with future revisions of your paper. I always, as a reviewer, especially if I feel like I'm having to say some hard things or reject a paper, it's always nice to have something, you did this very well, or this, I'll be excited to see this part in the future, or, future revisions hinting that you should resubmit this. So like Leslie was saying, just because you get a rejection is not always the worst thing, because I too have been rejected, and you learn wonderful things from that.
The other thing, really quickly, is remember that the reviewers are you. And so sometimes they don't really know. And we're sorry about that, that we have to base decisions on the reviews we get.
Yes, thank you. And so in here you can see again that there is a consistency, consistent rating across reviewers, right? Even though I know that the reviewers are us, but if there's 3 of us who really consistently still are telling me, well, you really need to strengthen methods and data sources and theoretical framework. And it makes sense. I was really a novice researcher with this paper. This was a long time ago, and actually have to say that don't worry about my self-esteem. This very same paper already got published in the Journal for Latinos of Education, if you're interested. So really, it helped me, and that's what I think is the beauty of AERA. It helped me to first get it rejected, but then I presented it again. And then, I had a very solid based on what to publish, right? To publish in a journal. So I really love this community of researchers that can be sometimes a little bit hurtful for me to say, oh no, I wanted this to pass, but it's just an exercise of trial and error, as I said at the very beginning. So that's why I think it's really worth trying. And that's what we are here now, to really make you want to submit your paper and see if you can get accepted, and then have those wonderful conversations when you present it.
Okay, so the formats for the different kind of submissions are paper sessions, which are obviously a little bit more formal. In narrative, sometimes we play with that formality and move things around, but in general, there's a panel of papers, there's a discussant or 2, and the chair is really important in that paper session. You have your time, you have to stick to your time because everyone else has to stick to theirs. So it tends to be a little bit more regimented. Like I said, in narrative, sometimes we play with that format a little bit and maybe do breakout groups and come back together, but it really depends on the session and the chair. Then there are poster sessions, and like Stephanie said, we don't have a large history of doing lots of poster sessions, but that doesn't mean that you can't submit a poster session. And we accept, we sometimes do poster sessions. It just depends on what fits best. And then actually for our SIG, roundtable sessions tend to be really seen as favorable, almost up there with paper sessions, because it's a little bit more intimate. You get to sit around a table and you really get a chance to look your audience in the eye and talk about whatever is in your paper. So when you're thinking, when you submit your proposal, sometimes we get wrapped up in, well, nobody really cares about poster sessions, and so I'm not even going to put that down. Be willing to explore presenting as a paper session, as a poster, as a roundtable, because this is a group where if we've accepted you in, we want to talk to you. We want that interaction. We want to hear more about your work. And so, think about all of those different formats as valuable places where you can talk to other scholars and colleagues and get some good feedback. Okay, program chairs, walk us through the steps.
Awesome. So I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough for paper submission process. You'll start, of course, at aera.net. On the right-hand side, you'll want to go to login. Once you've entered your username, password, you'll click login, and the area you're looking for, again, at the upper right-hand corner, it's going to be My AERA. And so once you've entered that section, that's where you'll see pretty much all of your membership information, right? You'll want to scroll all the way down to the bottom till you get to the 2024 annual meeting. You'll click that to kind of open that portal. Once you get to the online program portal, you'll go to the submitter menu. And so the option that you're looking for is going to be submit or edit a paper or session submission. You'll, of course, be wanting to submit a new paper or session. We make it pretty easy. Of course, you're submitting to a SIG. So since it's not a division and you're not having to look through, all of maybe the different sections of a division, you'll want to make sure that you are choosing narrative research SIG. One thing to note is that your paper should only be submitted to one unit. I can't say it's nothing that folks don't try. To submit the same paper to multiple units, but of course, yes, the system will catch you, and so it will
catch you. I do several different segments, and sometimes I've gotten papers submitted to teacher ed and narrative, or teacher ed and self-study. People catch you.
Definitely, definitely. So we want to say again, please always submit your paper to one unit so that we can all stay on the up and up. You can go to the next slide, Eliza. Thank you. So again, once you get to that point where you want to submit your paper, again, as Eliza said, as Stephanie mentioned, right, you can choose the format. So whether you're submitting for a paper, poster, roundtable, I will say that I tend to choose paper and roundtable. Like last year, I got accepted for a roundtable, and the roundtable was actually a really fantastic experience. There were amazing papers at my table for narrative research. The room was huge and full, and so there were so many amazing roundtables. But you can choose more than one format. You want to make sure that you choose what you feel most comfortable in, right? So if you choose a paper session, you want to go with that, that you are kind of committing to that, because as program chairs, when we're organizing things, we go based, of course, on what you have selected. And so it's really helpful for folks to kind of stick with that first choice. If your paper is accepted, you will not, hopefully be placed in one that you didn't choose. But of course, I think as Stephanie mentioned earlier, if let's say there's a group of things that are really amazing and would fit really well together, that might be something that we can reach out and maybe contact you as the author about if your paper is accepted. To the next slide. Next slide. We've already kind of gone over some of those key things, of course, to keep in mind with your proposal. Make sure that your title is there with the 15 words or less, your abstract, 120 words, and of course, your full proposal, 2,000 words. And then you'll click accept and continue. So not a terribly difficult, pretty user-friendly online program portal.
Well, thank you, Megan. And then after that, of course, review your submission. Make sure you have, sometimes it happens that you are the one in charge of submitting, and maybe you don't have your co-authors information. So make sure you have their email, and because you're going to be needing that, papers must be in the form of complete narrative papers, 2,000 words. We already talked about that. References, tables, and charts, and graphs, and images, and figures should be added to the end of the document and are not included in the word count. And then click upload paper, right? And affirm that, of course, that everything has been ethical, right? And according to the guidelines. And then if the paper is submitted successfully, immediately you get an email that it will tell you that a confirmation. I would say immediately. It says here 24 hours, but it's usually immediately that you get a confirmation, and then you can send it to your co-authors if you have co-authors saying, "Hey, I did my part." And so we hope to get many of your proposals.
One thing I want to also mention is you can revise your submission. And it will sort of update up until the deadline for submissions. So say you've put stuff, you filled everything in, and then whoops, you totally forgot, you've got 8 people on a paper. It's a lot of people on a paper, but you forget to put somebody in, or you forget to put something in, or the document you uploaded gets all wonky and you're worried that maybe it's not the right one. You can always submit an updated one, and you can do that up until the portal closes for submissions, which is again July 31st at midnight, 11:59, but midnight. So if you wake up in a dead panic, just know you do have some time to come back to it. All right, so we've done a lot of talking and thrown a lot of information at you. Now is your time. Here is a good resource for you. It doesn't have Stephanie Penninger's email, but if you would like to get her feedback specifically, you can message her and get response from her. But you can also reach out to anyone listed here. If it's your first time, if you're wondering if something fits, if you want to know the best way for success. I know I've already gotten a couple of inquiries this year, and it's really helpful. Also, if you're watching this because you're thinking about being a reviewer, we are hoping to have another webinar just for the review process. But that's another way that you can reach out to us and ask a question. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for questions.